So it's funny how, you do transitions from one video of a certain series to another. And sometimes you're thinking that you do like one former site, like the A's, like you do the Philadelphia A's, and then you transition into the Oakland A's. And also the fact that um, times that you got like for basketball, sometime well, I transferred once from the Buffalo Braves to the LA Clippers because that's where the timeline is. Buffalo got an expansion team. They moved to San Diego, and then they moved to LA to become the Clippers. And then for football, it's maybe talk about the Cardinals, both in St. Louis and in Arizona. I can't remember if I did that, but I know I'm doing this. It was kind of purpose on hashtag purpose, not on purpose. But last video about the NHL, I talked about the Minnesota North Stars in 1992 and their run to the Cup final, like to see what if the last time the North Stars made a move, but then '93 they sucked, missed the playoffs, and then they got moved to Dallas. So what about the team, the city they landed in, and that'd be Dallas? I'm talking about the Dallas Stars and one of the most egregious mistakes by a Dallas Stars team ever. Hello out there, we're on the air. It's Cutter with NHL time. Tensions blow, the whistle blown, and the pucks go down the ice. Some teams just want to win the cup and do it with a smile. Hey, that is cool. Up on the River Nile. Oh, the good old hockey game. Who will come out on top? Will a team get through the cup to the cup by any means necessary? Oh, the good old hockey game. It's the best game you can name. And I'm have no shame. I will simulate those hockey games. Woo! So, of course, the story of the Dallas Stars has to do with the Minnesota North Stars and all that. I will try to be my best not to get too much into the Minnesota North Stars thing. But Minnesota got themselves an expansion team in 1967, part of the Great Expansion, with 6 teams added on to the original 6 teams. The North Stars were decent and all that. They got to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1981, 3 years after they were in a merger with the Cleveland Barons. Cleveland's team merged with Minnesota's team. Minnesota kept their team. And then they had all these Cleveland Barons like Dennis Berwick and Gilles Meloche. The North Stars would make the finals in 1981. Well, 1980, they actually went to the quarters and shocked the 4-time defending Stanley Cup champion Montreal Canadiens in a Game 7 in Montreal. And then, of course, you got yourself 1981 making the finals. And then the North Stars were like average at best. And then in 1991, despite them being 4th place in the division and barely making the playoffs because the Toronto Maple Leafs were that terribly, the North Stars took on the Chicago Blackhawks, who were dominant, the best team in the NHL, and then beat them. Beat St. Louis, the second best team in the NHL, and then they took on Edmonton and beat the defending Stanley Cup champions to get to the final against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Had a 2-1 series lead on the Penguins and then squandered it. And then I talked about the '92 team that was up 3-1 on the Red Wings and looking like they were going to the division finals against Chicago. But unfortunately for them, they choked 3 straight games, 2 in overtime. Yves Racine, I blanked on the name of the Red Wing who scored that overtime goal in Minnesota Detroit, the first one, and it was Yves Racine who did that. Not well, and then of course the Sergei Fedorov goal that went onto the crossbar. So anyway, the North Stars choked that series, and then they missed the '93 finals. I mean, the '93 playoffs, and of course, that's when Norm Green became bitchy and decided to move the team to Dallas. So Minnesota was without hockey for a while, and then they were given an expansion team that started in 2000 called the Minnesota Wild. Yeah, pretty wild, don't you think? And then, Dallas came through. In their first season, they actually had a successful playoff series against the St. Louis Blues, got to the conference semis against the Vancouver Canucks, and were supposed to take care of Vancouver easily because of the seeding. But Dallas got their butts handed to them by the Canucks in 5, who were riding off the wave of being good against Calgary, having to win 3 straight games in overtime. So anyway, the Dallas Stars had a few seasons, and then of course I'm talking about the 1997 Dallas Stars in this one. Dallas then started to become decent. In '98, they pushed Detroit to 6 games in the conference finals before losing. In '99, they got to the final. Yeah, they got to the final against Buffalo, despite a Jason Woolley goal to win Game One for Buffalo. The Stars won in 6 games thanks to Brett Hall's triple overtime goal in the foot in the crease move. The NHL said it was allowable if he had possession of the puck. Of course, they didn't tell everyone else. And then in 2000, the Stars got to the final, took on the Devils, got beaten in Game 6 thanks to Jason Arnott's goal. And that was it. The Stars would have a rivalry with the Edmonton Oilers. Well, of course, we'll talk about the kind of start of the Stars Oilers rivalry because they've met in the last 2 Western Conference Finals as of this taping, and Edmonton's won both times to get to the Stanley Cup Finals. So anyhow, Dallas had some great players like Mike Modano, Brett Hall, Marty Turco, Richard Mavchuk, Craig Woodwig, Mikko Heiskanen, Jason Robertson, uh, blanking on a lot of people's names. Joseph Dor, Sergei Subov, and the Otter, Jake Ottinger. So Dallas in the 2010s were decent and all that in the 2020s, but just couldn't get the hump. But in 2020, in the pandemic playoffs, as they call it, they actually won the conference final and would take on the Tampa Bay Lightning to go to the Stanley Cup, but lost the cup. So anyhow, let's talk about the 1987 Dallas Stars. So the 96-97 Dallas Stars happened. It was the 4th season in Dallas and the 30th as a franchise. They would win the Central with 104 points, even ahead of those pesky Detroit Red Wings who had 94. Phoenix, St. Louis, and Chicago all qualified in the Central. Toronto was just, sucky. The Avalanche were the top team in the West, and they were the President's Trophy winners. So they were favored to win their second straight Stanley Cup based on that merit. Dallas was second with 104. They would take on the Edmonton Oilers, who beat Chicago in a tiebreak, I guess more wins, to get the 7th seed. So Chicago would go to Colorado. Had a little bit of success, though. St. Louis would head to Detroit. Well, they tied Phoenix, but Phoenix had more wins. So St. Louis would go to Detroit, get their butts into the first round, and the Coyotes and Ducks would play a 7-game series. So in the playoffs, after a decent regular season, they beat the Oilers at home, lost the next 2, they lost 2 games to the Oilers in overtime, including a double overtime game winner by, I would like to say Bookberger, but that was game 3. I don't know who was game 5 for them. But nevertheless, it was a double overtime loss, and then they had to go to Edmonton and beat the Oilers in their building to force a game 7. It was a good game 7, back and forth, and then overtime back in. And then Dallas thought they had the shot. Nieuwendyk had a good shot on the left side of the target, but CUJO somehow came cross crease and robbed Nieuwendyk of the shot. It was just unbelievable. How the heck did he have that foresight and all that? That would be the last time that CUJO in an Oilers jersey actually made a save. That was fantastic in a game 7 in '98 in the first round against the Avalanche. He made this spectacular save. His team was up 4-0, but he made this spectacular save, I think, on Kaminsky, where half the net was vacated, and then CUJO slides across and somehow manages to make the save, shocking a lot of people. But then late in overtime, a few minutes after the CUJO save, Tom Marchand did. Marchand scores, and the Edmonton Oilers are going to move on. Words of the immortal late Bob Cole. And the Oilers would go on to get their butts handed to them by the Avalanche in the playoffs, but who cares? They took care of Dallas. Modano for big, Nieuwendyk was on that team. The goaltending, Eddie Moog would be the star for Dallas. Like he was at Dallas Star after Boston traded him to Dallas for John Casey. And then Artur Zerbe was the backup? I forgot about that. I know he played for the Sharks for a while, but I guess he went to Dallas in free agency. Roman Turek, who would be decent as a player, was there. But yeah, Andy Moog was the star goalie. He would be sent off in free agency to Montreal, trying to help him out. And Herbe, I don't think did much and all that. I know Ed Belfort would start to be the goalie. I think 90, I can't remember. Was it 98 that Belfort came in? Well, anyway, Darian Hatcher, Ken Hitchcock, Mike Modano, and Andy Moog were going to the All Star game. Modano could not play, so Kajak had to come in. Milestones, Roman Turek made his pro debut in November 1996. Pat Verbeek's 1,000th game played, which is pretty good, and a silver stick. Draft picks in the 96 draft. Rick Jackman, decent defenseman, but not much well known. John Sim from the Sarnia. Ian McElhaney, who played for London Knights. I used to watch OHL games. So yeah, Dallas did okay in a sense. But what would have happened if they had not or hit CUJO? Let's find out. So the 97 Detroit Red Wings would play the 1997 Dallas Stars. So if Edmonton had not taken care of Dallas, they would not have played Colorado. The one seed Colorado, but that was the only upset in the Western playoffs. Colorado as the one seed, Dallas now and then would be the two seed. Detroit as a three seed won the series, and the Ducks as a four seed won their series. So the Ducks would face Colorado, and we would have done Colorado beating Anaheim because Colorado was in the conference finals and were late. So the question on everyone's lips will be, what if Dallas took on Detroit in the 97 playoffs? And Mike Ferner was the star goalie for the 97 run, so we will obey that law. Game one saw the Stars win narrowly 2-1. Lepton and Greg Adams scoring for Dallas. Fedorov for Detroit. Joey Koser got 34 seconds, but that's Slavik Kozlov only getting 2.5 minutes. Wow. Bob Basson not getting a lot. Grand Marshall, the three stars. Well, Nieuwendyk got hurt. Moog, Ferdinand, and Adams. So Nieuwendyk just got hurt. So they're going to go with Langenbrunner on the left side. And Dallas ends up winning the game anyhow. Modano, Adams, and Broaden. So Greg Adams with 2 goals, unreal. And the immortal Neil Broaden, who's number 7, is I don't know. I think it's retired by the Stars. But yeah, he did his job, and then Dallas would have been up 2-0. Moog the star, Holstrom got hurt. Moog, Adams, and Modano, your 3 stars. So they had to head to Detroit, Rock City, and win 3-0. Modano, Adams. So Greg Adams has come out of freaking nowhere. So the Red Wings just can't get anything past Andy Moog. Modano and Adams, the other stars. Well, Andy Moog isn't Stanley Cup champion with the Edmonton Oilers. Game 4, they go with Chris Osgood because they're down 3-0. You have nothing to play for, nothing to worry about, nothing to show for. And Dallas would have beaten Detroit 5-3. Nieuwendyk and Darian Hatcher in the second period. Bobby Urey for Detroit. Fedorov tied it at 2. Sador made it 3-2 on the power play, and then Lidstrom made it 3-3. But then 2 late goals by Lefton and Sador would have sunk the Red Wings, and the Dallas Stars would have moved on, sweeping Detroit and then going to face Colorado. Sador, Lidstrom, and Lefton in your 3 stars of the game. So that's just how it would have went. So Dallas, they would have to go to Colorado because Colorado was the number 1 team that year. So it would be Moog versus Waugh. Where's Kaminsky Messier? Why is Sackett not on the top line? I don't know so much. Nevertheless, yeah. Game 1 would have seen the Stars win in overtime. 6 goals in the first period. Nieuwendyk for Beacon, Langenbrunner for Dallas, Sandis, Oslund, Sakic, and Mike Ricci for Colorado. Krug would have made it 4-3. Mike Ricci made it 5-3, and it looked like the Avalanche were going to win game 1. But Modano Langenbrunner tied it late. And then in overtime, Modano from Lepton and Langenbrunner. 6-5. You see Ford, Bob Basson, Sergei Makarov, the immortal Sergei Makarov was on that team. I didn't know that. Todd Harvey, Bill Hurd, Mavchuk getting a lot of time. Brad Severin only getting minute 27. Langenbrunner, Ricci, and Modano. Game 2 would have seen the Stars lose to the Avalanche 4-3, so it's 1-1. The Avalanche were up quickly. Young, Deadmarsh, and 2 from Kaminsky made it 4-1. Modano scored for Dallas. Then Langenbrunner made 4-2. Sador made it 4-3, but TLTL. Too little, too late. Kamensky, Sador, Subov, your 3 stars. So 1-1 headed back to Dallas. And in game 3, the Stars would have lost in overtime. Langerbruner and Young canceled each other out goals, or Miller and Subov canceled each other with goals. London made it 3-2 Dallas. Colorado made it 3-3 off Kamensky. Nieuwendyk would have made it 4-3. Sakic made it 4-4. And then in overtime, Claude Lemieux scored in overtime. Sakic, Sador, and Subov, your 3 stars. Game 4 would have seen the Dallas Stars easily handle Colorado 7-1. So Dallas somehow won. Wall would have been replaced by Craig Billington. The only obstacle was a Sakic, but Leftinen, Engelbert, Modano, Leftinen, Sador, and Greg Adams. So yeah, Billington did okay in a sense. Wall gave up 5 goals on 11 shots. Wow. Modano, Leftinen, and Adams, your 3 stars. So they go back to Colorado for game 5 and lose. So the Dallas Stars would have fell to Colorado in the conference finals. Colorado would have faced Philly, and who knows what would have happened. But yeah, Dallas fumbled the bag. Ozelinch and Denmark made it 2-0. Modano made it 2-1. Keith Jones, yes, that Keith Jones made it 3-1. Nieuwendyk made it 3-2. So Yuri Leptinen was hurt. While Denmark and Ozelinch. So Colorado would have sunk Dallas, got to the Stanley Cup Finals against Philly, and who knows, maybe they would have won their second straight Stanley Cup. I think they would have. But anyway, yeah. So that's the end of Dallas's thing. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond. No do.